Hey everybody, and welcome back to the channel. It's your girl Lori, and this is episode 2 of the self-discipline series. And I know that in order to have self-discipline, you're going to have to face the hard things. So that's what this episode is on, is you got to do the hard things first, right? Because think about this, right? Is if I asked you to plan a vacation, I give you all the money in the world. It's like, here, plan a vacation. It might be a lot of work, but you'd be like, oh my God, it's a vacation. But if I asked you to go do a thesis on the paper, you might be like, oh my God, I'd rather walk naked down the street than go do that, right? So here's the key to having self-discipline. So, in yesterday's episode, how we were talking about having a plan, knowing your why, like, why do you have this plan in the first place? And as long as you're not doing it out of desperation, instant gratification, these are all really important things. So a part of the reason that the self-discipline goes off the tracks is because when the hard things come up, the hard things, or say the things we don't want to do, let's call it like it is. Yeah, they're harder, but we also don't feel like doing them. And I remember years ago, somebody said this to me and it's just kind of stuck in my head. It was just like a passing conversation too, but successful, whatever you deem as to being successful people do the things that you don't want to do first. What I mean by that is if you set, so if we're going back into your scheduling, right? Let's say into your routine, things like that. And you're like, oh, that one's really hard. Do it first. Get it completely out of the way. Stop waiting for motivation. Motivation is not real. Okay. It is not real. It is not real. Okay. Because think of this. If you don't feel like doing it, you go, oh, I'm just not motivated. Well, now you have an out, right? Because you literally just said, I don't have any motivation. So you've told yourself that it's allowed, you can't wait to feel ready. Okay. There's not a scenario, and I said this before, there's not a scenario where you get the confidence or you get this motivation and then you do the things. I mean, sometimes it's great to be inspired, right? But that's where you have to be careful of too, because if you're a person who starts like you're a really good starter, like you're a professional project starter, you are like, you got that on lock. If that was a profession, you'd be the top of your game. The problem comes where you're like, okay, well, now I got to do all of the little mundane pieces. Like I got to focus on the things that aren't so fun or so tedious. So you have to wrap your head around that now, right? So part of your self-discipline, the easy things we can do, life in general, when life is easy, when it's fun, wow, we're like, wow, look at us. We're really making progress. Well, yeah, you are. But I mean, we can all do things when things are going well. It's how do you respond when things are not? How do you respond to it where the difficulties come into play? So again, in the beginning of starting a project, you get that dopamine, right? You get that dopamine hit. You're like, yeah, I got this. I can do this, right? And then it starts to get a little mundane. You're like, okay, it's not fun anymore. Right. You're waiting for it to be fun. You're waiting for it to be easy. So you need to embrace that now and say, yeah, look, if I know I have these 10 things to do today, I'm going to do the one that I want to do least. I'm going to do that first. Right. So it's not trickery, but you're kind of saying, okay, if I can get that out of the way, everything else is easy. It's like being in school. If you have a favorite subject, some of the other subjects you're just like trying to put off, and you only want to focus on the ones that are good. But if you do it the other way around, then it's a wash, right? Then you're like, oh my gosh, this is easy breezy. So you have to be careful of falling into that trap of if it's the mundane things, which is why what I was saying yesterday is you got to do the baby steps, the micro goals. You have to plan for success. Without a plan, right? You know that without a plan, it's just a dream, right? It's just a wish, right? If you're like, this is what I'm going to do, but you have no plan, well, you have no plan, you have no direction. So it's going to seem overwhelming. So when it seems overwhelming, that's when a lot of times you just shut down, right? You go, okay, it's easier if I just don't do anything. Yeah. But the procrastination, which we're going to talk about tomorrow, but the procrastination piece of it is self-sabotaging. So there's not a scenario where procrastination is helpful for any of us. We all do it because it's easy. I don't want to do it, so we put it off. The problem is you can't just keep putting it off. It's not like it just disappears. Things still have to happen. So that's a thing when somebody says, hey, I want to start a new business, or I want to start said thing, or I want to do this. Okay, great. So what are the research steps? Well, man, I'm not sure. Right. See, everybody, the end goal is great and it's beautiful. The Super Bowl ring on the hand is great, but there was a lot of work that went into that. A lot of trials, tribulations, setbacks, painful things. Like, you know what I mean? So you have to be willing to be disciplined. That is where self-discipline needs to shine. It doesn't take anything to be self-disciplined when things are going fine. Like Okay. So you have to allow yourself to push it. And the reason that we lack that self discipline is the moment that it's not hard, the moment that it's hard or that it feels as though it's going to be a level of stress, you just kind of go, oh, I don't really want to do it. Now, the funny thing is, though, if that was somebody else, very often you're going to encourage them through it. So you also have to do that to yourself. Right. And it's self discipline. It's not everybody else's discipline. So don't worry about what their process is. Don't worry about what they're doing or not doing. That is not your problem. That's other people discipline. That is not self discipline. So you want to allow yourself to be in that self discipline of, I'm doing this for me. Don't do it for any accolades. Don't do it to say, oh my God, look at you. You're so amazing. You can do that for yourself. But so what you want to do is the things that you keep avoiding or the things that seem the hardest, those are the ones that you want to rise to the top. Okay. And then once you can get through that and you can realize that it's not always fun, that it's mundane, it's not always, like I said, it's not always exciting. And a lot of this you're going to have to do in the dark. And what I mean by that is, remember, you grind in the dark, you shine in the light. Not everybody needs to know what you're working on. Not everybody needs to be abreast to every little step that you're taking. This is your journey. This is your project. So I also want you to be doing it for the right reasons, which is what we talked about yesterday. So your why has to always be centered around you, not why for other people. When you're good and when you practice that self-love, then other people around you get the best version of you anyway. So instead of looking at that as like, well, that could be selfish, it's not, because you have to know who you are, just like your self-discipline. So if you tell yourself, I'm not disciplined, well, then you're right. If you tell yourself you are disciplined, well, you're right. If you think you can or you cannot, you're absolutely right either way. So you have to say, okay, what are the steps? What are each steps? That's those micro goals. What do I need to do to get to them? And then that's where you have to execute it. And I promise you, a lot of that's going to be boring. A lot of it's going to be research. A lot of it's going to take a lot more time than you think it is. You're going to start something, then you're going to like can it, then you're going to start something new, then you're going to can it until you can get through those little phases. But stop waiting to feel like doing it. And that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow, the procrastination piece of it, because that's a huge part of self-discipline, right? And so again, it comes down to that inner brat, which is your ego, right? It comes down to that inner brat inside of you that says, you know what, I don't want to do this. It's hard. I don't feel like doing it. Well, it doesn't disappear, right? You're just putting it off. So if you face the things that you don't want to do first, then everything else is like the icing to the cake. But you have to be disciplined, right? This is all about your self-discipline, how you want to regulate things. But it is so important that you allow yourself to be honest with yourself and know, hey, if this is my shortcoming, then let me lean into this. So you have to lean into what your weaknesses are. Take away that decision fatigue. If I know I want to write in my journals and I'm upstairs and my journals are downstairs, I'm going to procrastinate it. So what do? Have a set upstairs. Take away your excuses. You're building excuses for yourself. I'm not ready. I don't feel like it. I don't have time, all of which are unnecessary. Okay. So lean into your weaknesses, know what your weak points are, and then feed them. Embrace them. Don't judge them. Don't get upset with them. Embrace it for what it is. Okay. So when you allow that space, I want you to just be in a place of being honest with yourself, because you got to be honest with yourself. So instead of saying, well, I can't do this, right? Again, you're right. I can do this. Again, you're right. So you want to change that mentality and the perception on it, right? Because if we say it's hard, it's not fun, it sucks. Well, guess what? It's not going to make it any easier for you to do it. You're not going to do it overnight. You got to power through those things that you don't want to do. You got to power through them. That's how you get confidence. That's how you get resilience. So that's how we become more self-disciplined. You have a routine. You got to have a routine. You can't just do things fly by the seat of your pants. It's just not going to help you. And then you don't have a plan. So then you think you're not disciplined. But the reality is you just don't have a plan in the first place. Without a plan and without an executable, attainable plan, what is there to be disciplined about? You don't even know what you'd be disciplined for, and never out of desperation, right? So I want you to think of whatever you're working on now, whatever you want to be more disciplined in. Find what the hardest things are. Find where they lie. And that's what I want you to focus on. I want you to focus on the hard parts and going through them, sitting through that mundane. Allow yourself to get through it so you can see that you really can do it. And when you do that, those habits are self-discipline, right? So you're creating those habits. And if you listen to the podcast this past week, it was on building healthy habits. So feel free to go out and listen to that. I think it will really go hand in hand with self-discipline. See you tomorrow.